Welcome to The Explainer. You know, when we think about the history of the computer, a very specific story probably pops into your head. It's a story we all know, but what if I told you that story is, well, it's just one version, and maybe not even the most interesting one? Today, we're going to tear up that familiar script. We're diving deep into the fascinating work of Alexander Galloway to uncover a secret history of the digital world, a history that's much older, a whole lot stranger, and I promise you, far more interesting than you've ever imagined. So let's really dig into that popular history for a moment. It's like a perfect Hollywood movie plot, right? It kicks off with heroic figures like Alan Turing and the wartime codebreakers. Then you have the rise of the giants, these colossal room-sized mainframes from companies like IBM. And it all builds to this epic finale in Silicon Valley, with visionaries in garages, which eventually leads to this sleek, powerful device that's probably in your hand or your pocket right this second. It's a very clean, very neat, straight line of progress. But here's the big question Galloway forces us to ask. What if that's just the official story, the polished PR version? What if the real story, the one with all the messy details and weird detours left on the cutting room floor, is actually the more important one? What if the truth is just far more chaotic and way more fascinating?
And this is where Galloway's central argument really shines. He presents this incredibly powerful idea. He says, look, if you truly want to understand our digital world, you can't just study the winners. You can't just look at the success stories. That's only giving you half the picture. To get the whole truth, you have to go digging through the graveyard of ideas. You have to investigate what he calls the uncomputable. And what he means by that is all the brilliant concepts that were just forgotten. The strange and wonderful technologies that, for whatever reason, failed to catch on. All the analog dreams that seemed so promising, but ultimately just fizzled out. It's a history of failure, of things that didn't happen, of paths that weren't taken. And Galloway's point is profound. It's right there, in that story of decay and exclusion, that we find the hidden DNA, the true origins of our computational present.
All right, so let's get started. Our first stop on this alternative history tour is going to take us way, way back. I'm talking long before the first electronic computer was even a glimmer in someone's eye. And we're not going to a university lab or some top-secret military facility. No, we are headed to 19th century Paris, to an art studio of all places, because it's right there, hiding in plain sight, that we're going to find the core idea of the digital, decades before its time.
Okay, so try to picture the scene. The year is 1860. You're taking a walk down a grand boulevard in the heart of Paris, and you come across a sign for a new studio. A sign that advertises something that sounds, well, it sounds completely impossible. It's run by an artist and inventor, a man named Francois Willem, and his sign makes a wild promise. It says he creates portraits, but not paintings, not even photographs. He makes mechanical sculptures. Just try to imagine seeing that in 1860. He was offering to create a perfect, three-dimensional sculpture of you, using a machine. This wasn't just an improvement on an old idea, it was something totally, radically new.
And as you can imagine, people were absolutely floored. The reaction wasn't just interest, it was pure, unadulterated astonishment. The famous writer and critic of the day, Théophile Gautier, he made a special trip to see this invention for himself, and he was just completely blown away. He wrote that people had finally gotten used to the idea of the sun acting as a photographer, the camera capturing light to make an image. But this, the sun as a sculptor, he said the very idea made the imagination real. It didn't feel like science or art. It felt like straight-up magic was happening in that Parisian studio.
So you're probably wondering, okay, how in the world did this actually work? What was the trick? Well, the setup was as brilliant as it was theatrical. You, the client, would be led into the center of a large circular room, a rotunda, and you'd be asked to stand on a pedestal. And all around you, concealed within the walls, were 24 cameras. 24 separate lenses, all pointed directly at you from every conceivable angle. Then, on a signal, there'd be a sound, a simultaneous click. All 24 shutters firing in the exact same instant, capturing a complete 360-degree record of you in a single moment of time.
And this right here, this is the crucial difference, the thing that made it so revolutionary. A standard photograph, as amazing as it was, is still flat. It gives you one perspective, one point of view, frozen in time. But what Willem's photo sculpture produced wasn't just a picture. It gave you a volume.
It was a data set that described your form in 3 dimensions. It wasn't just an image of you, it was a full capture of you in space, created by mathematically combining all those individual photographic profiles into a single volumetric whole.
Now here is the mind-bending part, the part that connects directly to today. What Galloway invented was, in its essence, a digital process. And I know you might think, wait, digital? There were no electronics, no computers. But the word digital simply means to break a continuous thing down into discrete, countable units. And that is precisely what was happening. But it wasn't digital in time, like the separate frames of a movie reel. This was digital in space. Each of those 24 photographs was a single discrete sample, a data point. And when you put all of those data points together, you could reconstruct a 3-dimensional model. It was effectively 3D scanning, the exact same core principle behind modern computer graphics and 3D printing, but he was doing it a full century earlier with nothing but cameras, light, and incredible ingenuity.
So just hold on to that idea for a second. This concept of breaking reality down into discrete spatial samples. It's a hugely important and deeply uncomputable ancestor of our digital age. But it wasn't the only one. Our next stop on this journey is maybe even more unexpected. We're going to jump forward to the 1940s. But once again, we're not going to an electronics lab. We're headed to a craft studio to look at an ordinary hand loom. Because believe it or not, we're about to discover complex, elegant algorithms being written not in binary code, but in actual physical thread.
I want you to meet Ada Dietz. And what's so remarkable about her story is that she wasn't a computer scientist or an engineer, she was a high school math teacher. Her day job was teaching algebra. But she was also a very skilled weaver. And one day, with some encouragement from her artist friend Ruth Foster, she had a kind of epiphany. She started to look at her loom, this ancient mechanical tool for making cloth, and she saw something else entirely. She saw a machine for computation. She saw a way to turn abstract math into physical beauty.
Now, Ada Dietz had no interest in making traditional, boring, repeating patterns like you'd see on a kitchen towel. She was chasing a much more sophisticated aesthetic, one she described with the wonderful phrase, regular irregularity. Just think about that paradox for a moment. She wanted to create designs that, on the surface, looked complex, maybe even a little bit random, but she wanted them to be secretly governed by a deep, underlying order. A kind of controlled chaos, where a hidden logic produced a beautiful, unpredictable result.
So where do you find a system that is perfectly ordered and yet produces incredible complexity? Well, Ada Dietz found the answer in the very last place most artists would look, her high school algebra textbook. She had this absolute stroke of genius. She realized she could take a complex algebraic formula, like this big 6-term polynomial you see here, and use it not to find the value of x, but to use it as the literal source code for her art. The equation became the blueprint. Her process was just so incredibly clever. She would take the equation and expand it algebraically into all its component parts. And then she developed a system, a cipher, to translate each part of that equation directly into a set of instructions for threading her loom. A variable like A would correspond to one threading sequence, B to another. The coefficients told her how many times to repeat a sequence. The mathematical operations became weaving operations. It was a direct one-to-one translation. Abstract equations went in one end, and tangible, beautiful fabric came out the other. She was literally weaving algebra into existence.
And the textiles themselves? They were absolutely stunning. They looked nothing like other fabrics of the time. They were complex, abstract, and felt incredibly modern. So much so that one person who saw them exclaimed they were like a cubist's dream. And you can totally see why. They have that same quality of being broken down and reassembled according to a hidden logic. Because these weren't just random patterns, they were physical manifestations of pure mathematical truth, an algorithm made of thread. Another powerful, uncomputable ancestor of our digital world.
Okay, so let's pause and take stock. We've seen these incredible, proto-digital ideas bubbling up for decades in these really unexpected places. But now we arrive at a crucial turning point, right around the mid-20th century. This is when things change. These scattered, analog, uncomputable concepts start to get formalized. They get hardened into rigid systems, systems of logic, systems of control, and as we'll see, even systems of play.
And it's this process of formalization that sets the stage for the deeply systematized, black-boxed world that we all inhabit today.
To really get our heads around this shift, Galloway gives us this fantastic concept, the black box. But he says there are two distinct types, and society has gone through a massive reversal from one to the other. The old model was the black box cipher. Think of a product on a store shelf. To a child, it's magical. It just appears. But its origin is completely rational. You can, with enough effort, trace the supply chain, visit the factory, and decode its creation. The outside seems mystical, but the inside is logical. Today, we live in the era of the opposite, the black box function. Think about your computer. The outside interface is perfectly rational. You click a button, something predictable happens. Input, output. But the inside, the billions of calculations happening on the silicon, the layers upon layers of code? For almost all of us, that is a completely mystical, unknowable realm. The outside is rational, but the inside is magic. This flip is one of the defining features of modern life.
And this new reality, this world of ours filled with rational surfaces that hide mystical depths, is captured perfectly by a board game. It sounds strange, but it's true. The game was created in 1977 by the French avant-garde theorist Guy Debord. Now, Debord was a pretty famous and radical thinker, best known for his scathing critiques of consumerism and modern media. He wasn't exactly the kind of guy you'd expect to be designing games. But this one game he made is an incredibly insightful allegory for our times.
So at first glance, Debord's game of war looks like a pretty standard strategy game. You've got a gridded board, two opposing armies, pieces that have different strengths and weaknesses. It feels a bit like chess. But then Debord adds this one absolutely brilliant twist that changes everything. Winning isn't just about capturing your opponent's pieces. The most important rule, the thing the entire game hinges on, is that you must maintain your lines of communication. Now, what does that mean? It means you have to constantly imagine an invisible network connecting your army units all the way back to your bases. And if your opponent makes a move that severs one of those invisible lines, your unit, even though it's still on the board, is instantly neutralized. It's cut off. It can't move. It can't fight. It's useless. Just think about the implications of that for a second. The most important, most powerful rule in the entire game is something you cannot see. It exists only in your mind. To play, you have to constantly be calculating and visualizing this invisible network that underpins everything on the board. And that's when the light bulb goes on. You realize this isn't just a game about military strategy. It's a powerful allegory for modern life. We are all, every day, interacting with massive, complex systems. Social media algorithms, financial markets, bureaucratic structures, whose own lines of communication, whose real rules of operation are completely hidden from us. We're all playing a game where we can't see the most important rules.
And so this brings everything together. It brings us back to the start of our journey. From Francois Willem capturing discrete slices of space, to Ada Dietz weaving mathematical algorithms, to Guy Debord designing a game around invisible networks, we see a clear pattern emerging. The neat, tidy, triumphant story of the computer that we're all told, it's a myth. It's an oversimplification. The digital world we live in didn't just appear. It actually grew out of this messy, rich, uncomputable history. A history filled with forgotten analog ideas, brilliant failures, and entire ways of thinking that were systematically rendered invisible.
So what do we do with this knowledge? Galloway's work suggests a fascinating, almost subversive path forward. He suggests that perhaps the most radical, most powerful act in our highly digitized world isn't building more systems, but learning how to take them apart. It's about becoming a kind of digital archaeologist. It's about unraveling the code, actively hunting for the glitches, and seeking out the cracks and holes in the systems that contain us. He uses this fantastic turn of phrase, it's not about a web of ruin, as in watching everything collapse. It's about a tactical ruin of the web. It's the act of deliberately probing and testing these systems to understand their hidden logic by seeing how and when they break. And this exploration of the uncomputable leaves us with a final and, frankly, a pretty provocative question. A question for you, for me, for all of us. As we navigate our daily lives, as we interact with the countless black boxes that shape our reality, from the algorithms on our phones to the vast economic systems that dictate our choices, we have to ask ourselves a hard question.
Are we consciously and strategically playing a game whose rules we actually understand? Are we the players? Or are we simply the pieces on the board, being moved around by immense invisible forces that we can't see, much less control?